getting very worried.
All right, thank you. Senator Roberts, over to you.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you all for being here.
Mr Taylor. Hi. I'd like to reference an exchange we had at the previous estimates regarding Menindee Lakes. I'll quote from the Hansard. I said, so Menindee Lakes is a vital component of the Murray Darling Basin plan. You said, it's a vital component of our environmental management of the system. And then I said, and it'll stay there. And you said, and we're actually getting those golden perch out of that system, connected through the Great Darling Outer Branch, down into the Murray and distributing those fish. They become a callop, as they're called in South Australia, and they travel thousands of kilometres over their life. So this is a critical part of what we're doing. So, of course, that was not an answer to my question. You dodged my question, so let me try again. Will the Murray Darling Basin Authority keep the Menindee Lakes as an environmentally important wetland, having the same area as it currently has, and including water storage with the current capacity, with the level, of course, being decided by basin inflows? This is Queensland water, and we'd like to see it used properly.
Thank you, Senator. I'm not sure that I'm in a position to answer on behalf of the Murray Darling Basin Authority in terms of future plans and management. And I think the other thing is that the Menindee system is a jointly managed lake and water resource, and it's jointly managed between New South Wales, the Commonwealth, South Australia and Victoria. So I'm not in a position to talk about.
Is there anyone from the Murray Darling Basin Authority who could answer that question?
Mr. Reynolds.
Will Menindee stay as it is? Vital part of the environment.
Thank you, Senator Roberts. So, as was discussed earlier, New South Wales is scoping or rescoping the Menindee project, now called the Better Barker project. That anticipates changes to the Menindee infrastructure and the operating rules for it. As departmental colleagues explained earlier, we are yet to have a scope of that project brought forward by the New South Wales government. So I can't give you the assurance that you've asked for, because that rescope project will inevitably change arrangements at Menindee Lakes.
Inevitably.
I think the proposal for the project is to look at how things can be done differently. If the project proceeds, then I think the circumstances at Menindee will be different to what they've been in the past.
So you can't give
The area will continue to be subject to water resource plans and water sharing plans, which will contain requirements in relation to environmental measures and environmental outcomes.
Absolutely. So the project, in terms of its development, will have to consider environmental impacts, benefits that could be achieved ultimately. But until we see that scope of the works, I can't advise on what the changes to the Menindee arrangements would be.
So, setting aside the sustainable diversion limit acquisitions currently underway, how much water is still required to complete the sustainable diversion limit acquisitions? I'd like a figure. And also, secondly, how much is required to complete upwater acquisition, the baseline diversion limits?
So, Senator, we addressed some of those questions this morning. The 605 Sustainable Diversion Limit Adjustment Measure program is made up of about 36 projects, for which a target recovery, gigalitre component was identified when those projects were conceived. The Murray Darling Basin Authority will go through a process we refer to as reconciliation in the lead up to the 1st of July 2024, and I'll let Mr. Reynolds talk you through that.
Okay.
And earlier this morning we provided an update on progress towards the 450 in terms of current entitlement holdings that are with the Commonwealth Environmental Water Holder, projects that are contracted, and projects that we are in discussions with states over.
Are you going to?
So in terms of the Sustainable Diversion Limit Adjustment Mechanism reconciliation process, the authority is required to take a decision in December 2023 as to whether or not a reconciliation is required. That decision can't be taken earlier than that because states are able to advise notifications to modifications to their projects up until that point in time. So we won't have clarity about what the package of works looks like until that point in time. If, on the basis of our understanding of the projects, their progress and the condition they're likely to be in June 2024, the authority determines that the adjustment amount is likely to be different than what was determined in the original decision, then we'll undertake a reconciliation. So we'll assess the projects as they are notified at the end of December 2023, and we'll make an assessment of the volume of water or the offset that they actually will achieve at that point in time.
You have a document, I think it's from your website, Murray Darling Basin Authority, Progress on Water Recovery. It's from your website.
Okay.
It says Summary of Surface Water Recovery Progress. Following the amendments, it includes, second bullet point, following the amendments to the Basin Plan, the overall target for water recovery is 2075 gigalitres per year, plus 450 gigalitres per year of efficiency measures by 2024. So that's 25 in total. And then down on page 3 of that website page, it says total water recovery still required is just 46 gigalitres.
So I think that's
We addressed those figures earlier this morning as well. So the gap bridging target under the Basin Plan is 2,075 gigalitres, 2,100, and I think 5 gigalitres have actually been recovered and are held by way of entitlements with the Commonwealth Environmental Water Holder. So 98% of the target has been reached, but there remains about 46 gigalitres across the basin that needs to be recovered from different water resource plan areas.
Okay. The other comment, Mr. Reynolds has already covered, so thank you for that. Moving on. So what is the baseline diversion limits? Just before I move on, how much water is still required to complete that, the upwater?
I guess there are 3 overall programs. There's the water recovery target of 2,075 gigalitres, so there's 46 gigalitres still to go there. Then the 450, what is known as upwater program, which I referred to earlier in terms of what's been delivered, what's contracted, discussions we're having with states. And then the third program is the 605 Sustainable Diversion Limit Adjustment Mechanism program, and Mr. Reynolds which Mr. Reynolds was discussing in terms of the reconciliation process that happens in 2024 in terms of there are 36 projects which go to make up that program of work that South Australia, Victoria and New South Wales have to deliver, and the authority will look at that program of works at the end of next year to determine whether a reconciliation needs to happen to identify whether the 605 will be met or what component of it will be met.
So as I've discussed with Mr. Glyde before and Mr. Reynolds and also the previous Water Commissioner, it's a very complex issue, isn't it? The whole thing, very complex with many variables and a lot of variation.
There are some key major complex areas of work. The Basin Plan is a significant water reform, and there are some complex components, as you'd expect, in a system, I think, where there are 20 surface water areas and about 13 groundwater systems.
And then we've got naturally variable climate, and the north varies considerably in a different way from the south. So I'll just raise that for the future. Turning to the southeast drains SDL acquisition, Mr. Reynolds, a reminder of your answer in the last estimates, quote, "The water from the southeast drains has been put forward by the South Australian Government as an SDL adjustment mechanism project. The water that comes from the southeast drains into the southern lagoon will be accounted for through that process. meaning it will be counted as SDL. How much water is the Murray Darling Basin Authority counting against the remaining SDL target for the southeast drains restoration flow?
As we've explained previously, the assignment of individual volumes to projects in terms of the adjustment mechanism can only be an estimate because the whole package of projects is modelled as a whole and they interact with one another. We do have made estimates, a broad range, a range against individual projects, and I'll just see if I can get the number for that particular project. I don't think I have it in my papers here. I'll have to get someone to provide that to me, but I'll provide it this morning.
I'd be very interested to see that number. I'm wondering if we've just found some more water.
Well, the Southeast Drains project is part of the adjustment mechanism, so it's been accounted for.
It's my view that this is a significant unaccountable flow, or hasn't been to date, and may provide a substantial part of the remaining SDL acquisition that can both take the pressure off farmers elsewhere in the basin while restoring the amazing Coorong wetland and moderating extreme salination in Lake Albert by flushing from the southeast, not from the northwest. I mean, actually from the northwest it's not really flushing. Have you modelled the southeast inflows? I think the answer was no at the last Senate estimates in October. Have you modelled the southeast inflows, both aquifer and surface flow? How much water is available? How much can be redirected? And this is really important, without interfering with agricultural production.
So we haven't modelled that directly. South Australian Government manages that part of the system, and we have consulted with them about the volumes. There's not a direct estimate of the total flow from the southeast drains, including through the groundwater systems into the Coorong, available. The operation of the southeast drains does provide water back to the southern lagoon in the Coorong, and that scheme has been developed and the operating rules have been developed to achieve that. There are requirements to manage the flows through the southeast drains. It is drainage from agricultural land. It does carry a nutrient load. There are particular management challenges with that water, so part of the southeast drainage scheme passes water through wetlands and the like to remove nutrient loads from that water before it enters the Coorong. If that's not done, then there are ecological impacts, undesirable ecological impacts in the Coorong itself, and so that limits somewhat the volume of water that comes from the southeast drains. But yeah, the South Australian Government is continuing to work through those issues.
So as I understand it, the drains are made by humans. They're not natural. And they take off a significant quantity of water.
Yeah, so
Straight to the
the
ocean.
area that's been drained naturally was a very low-lying marshy area, and water tended to lie in that area, and some of it would have just seeped through groundwater through groundwater systems to the sea. Some of it would have made its way to the Coorong. The drains are man-made structures that have taken water from that area and dried it out and made it more productive as an agricultural area.
I've been there and seen those drains. They're definitely man-made. There's a belief that there's a significant amount of water to be recaptured and sent to the Coorong.
And water is being captured through that system and does flow to the Coorong. I think from memory, it's in the order of 26 gigalitres on average. Obviously would change with seasonal conditions. Wet years it'll be more, drier years it would be less, but it's of that order.
So my understanding is there's a lot more water to be captured than that.
Well, I think the South Australian Government clearly has got an interest in trying to improve the health of the Coorong. They've undertaken an enormous amount of work in that region to do that. I'm sure they're examining whether or not it would be beneficial to take more water from that region if it's possible to do so for that purpose.
So the Coorong problem has been man-made, not by the rest of the basin, but by diversion of water that used to go through the Coorong straight to the ocean.
Well, I think some of the challenge...
I'm not being critical, because in those days they were just trying to look after their narrow scope. So, but that's something to return the environment to its natural state would require a lot of water to go back into the Coorong and keep it clean.
So there's obviously significant volumes of water diverted from the basin, which has reduced the volume of water that reaches the end of the system, particularly coming down the Murray. Part of the basin plan is part of the challenge is to address some of those issues, to get back to the natural balance of what happened in the Coorong before river regulation would require all of the water that's subsequently been diverted to be returned to the environment. No one is proposing to do that. We're looking for alternative solutions and alternative balances.
So shouldn't that southeast portion be counted as being part of the basin? Because you just said water is diverted from the basin, but it's not included in the basin just yet.
I'm sorry, when I said that I meant water is diverted from upstream in the basin from right across the basin. Yeah, very significant volumes are.
And this
diverted.
water's going straight to the ocean and doing damage by not going through the Coorong.
So I think the benefits that can be provided to the Coorong from diverting some water from the southeast drains are being realised through the project that's been implemented. I'm sure the South Australian Government and others will continue to examine where additional benefits might be able to be accrued. There is significant money from the Commonwealth Government has gone to the Goyder Institute to, I think it's $8 million has been committed. I think it's 8. Has been committed to examine options around how the Coorong, Lower Lakes and the Murray Mouth, other interventions that might be possible. That could include activities within the southeast drain system, although that has been explored fairly extensively already.
It's very complex. It made even more complicated by the politics involved at state and federal level, so we'll end it there for now. Lock zero in the...
Patrick, I'm sorry to interrupt you. Could you make this your last question?
Yes.
Thank you.
Lock zero in the last estimates.
I'm sorry, Senator Roberts, but we knew what was going on.
Anything alike.
They don't. They don't.
I don't know who you're insulting the most. So that was my last question. I've got...
Make this your last
Okay,
question.
thank you. Simple one, this one.
Senator Roberts.
Lock zero in the last estimates, you spoke about engineering challenges and other issues, and also used the phrase, lock zero, quote, lock zero was examined in some detail. If salt water is used in the lower lakes to protect against sulphur emissions, and that would be a 1 in 100 year type drought, it's an absolute last resort, then suddenly we will be wishing we'd built Lock Zero, wouldn't we? Doesn't the Murray Darling Basin Authority or the department have documentation on Lock Zero, which, quote, examined in some detail, would suggest exists? It seems like a significant project not to have some form of formal process underway.
So during the Millennium Drought, Lock Zero was considered as whether or not it would be an arrangement that would help protect the lower lakes. Part of that was looking at what flow would be required past Lock Zero to ensure that the lower lakes retained their ecological character. There is significant concern that if the flow of fresh water to the lower lakes was terminated and just allowed seawater into the lower lakes, that would progressively concentrate through evaporation and become hypersaline. And so the lower lakes would not be a natural estuary or a...
Well, it's not natural at the moment with the barrages.
No, but the lower lakes naturally would have had a much larger volume of fresh water flowing to the lower lakes, to the end of the system. We take a lot of water out upstream for irrigation and other productive purposes. And so that natural balance of mixing of fresh and salt water at the lower lakes cannot be reinstated unless there's a lot more water coming down the river system. Building Lock Zero does not alleviate that issue.
Okay, we'll leave it there for now. I've got some more questions that I'd like to have another go.
Thanks, Senator Roberts.